Hello and welcome to PDX Garden Home. It's been a cold fall so far here. We're heading into the second week in November and it's in the 40s to 50s during the day, maybe a high of 60 on some of the days, but yeah, it's not warm out here at all. I'm going to have you come around with me and I'll show you what we do at this point in the year because there's not as much growing, of course, going on with the weather like this. But there are some things still going on, some things growing in the garden, which I'll be able to show you later. But one of the things that we do in the fall, which can actually take a while to do, is refurbish the beds. So we clean out the beds. You can see what we did here. This was where you may have seen in some of our prior videos, we had a trellis and we had squash and pumpkins here, and same thing over here on this side. And so that's all been taken down. And then what we've thrown on top here is our own homemade compost, which is we don't have a chipper or shredder here, so you can tell it doesn't look pretty like the compost you buy from the stores does. But we put our home compost down now, and then later, before we actually replant the beds, we'll put down a fresh thin layer of the nice looking compost just for the look of the beds. We'll fertilize the beds and all that before we start growing it again. But we pretty much will leave these be for the winter. I haven't really gotten into growing cover crops. I'm sure some people looking at this will say, hey, you shouldn't just leave the bed uncovered for the winter. You should have a cover crop. But typically, I just haven't gotten into doing that yet. But maybe next year. We'll see as we kind of grow and expand. So come along with me. I'll show you what else we have here. Give you a view of it. We were a little bit careful here because we had some cabbage plants, which I don't expect will actually turn into great cabbage heads, but they can be decorative. So they'll kind of leaf out for the fall here and give us some amount of vegetation in here, as well as they can produce kind of a flowering, so they can be a flowering cabbage, which is, you can buy those in the store in the fall as kind of decoration. We just happen to have some already here, so that's great. One of the other things you can see that we're doing here, besides laying down more compost, is we re-edge the beds, because this part of the garden, we took an approach where we cut the beds essentially into the grass. And so we've got grass paths, and then we edge the bed, so we're not adding any material or wood around the beds to hold the beds in. We're basically creating a gutter between the grass paths and the actual beds, and then creating a raised bed itself from the compost that we're piling up year after year. I'm going to head you this way past the lemongrass in the pot here. That's actually done pretty well for the cold. Lemongrass is a tropical plant, so I assumed it would just die off really quickly, but it's actually continued to do well, and it has a good color to it, so it's nice decoration here. So yeah, I think you can see we've done the same thing with these two beds. We've cleared them out, and yeah, now they're ready to kind of sit for the winter. Like same thing I'm doing for the others. We put our homemade compost down on them. This stuff actually does look pretty good. I'm not sure exactly how that happened this year. I think a lot of it was bush trimmings. We had a lot of laurel hedge from a year ago that was trimmed, and that actually was chopped up and then put in the compost, and you could see that pile smoking. I don't usually get a good heat going on a lot of my compost because I don't spend the time to get the right combination of nitrogen and carbon and everything going in there. But for this particular compost, when it was composting down, it was doing what they always say it could do, right? It was actually running hot and steaming and composting down nicely, and yeah, became that. So this stuff actually looks pretty good, but we'll still put another fresh layer for looks and then fertilizer down before we plant out these beds later in the fall. So, or I said later in the fall, but I meant later next spring before we start planting. All right, well, that's some of what we're doing here at PDX Garden Home, and I'm gonna kind of take you around and show you some other things during this episode. So I will see you in the following segments.
In this episode, we are going to be looking at our young asparagus bed. We haven't harvested from this bed yet. We've got some young asparagus that's gone to fern, and we're going to be checking out what we did with it this last season. Then we're going to head over to the east garden where we have a large round flower bed. Time to clean it out. And finally, we're going to be harvesting celery. That's a new activity for us. We've never grown celery before, so let's see how we did this season.
Hi. Well, I'm here in the asparagus bed here. We planted asparagus a little over 2 years ago. I think it was a little over 2 years ago. And so that's what this is here. These are asparagus ferns. And this is my first go at it, so I'm just speaking from what I've read and seen, and then what I'm trying to do here. And that is that the plan was to let the asparagus go to fern so that it would collect enough energy to put back down into the root system. And so this bed here, which starts here and then goes a good 20 feet that direction, all the way down, you can probably see in the corner there the artichoke plants. This is where we planted the asparagus. And asparagus are a perennial, so you plant them and then they grow the asparagus spears, which you harvest. You're going to harvest that like late spring every year. And so normally if you had harvested, they wouldn't go to fern, because the spears, the thing that we eat, is that stem that's down toward the bottom of the asparagus plant. But we didn't harvest anything because from what I read, the idea is you don't want to harvest anything the first couple of years that you have your asparagus bed, because you want it to go to fern so that it can collect the energy to develop a good strong root system and then produce a lot of spears for you in the future. So that's the idea of what we were trying to do here. And so the first year I didn't plant anything else here. I just left it as the asparagus. I certainly didn't want to plant any other vegetables or heavy feeders here, because the whole idea was to let the asparagus grow as much as possible and give it as much sun and space and water and everything and nutrients to grow well. But this last season, I felt like, well, this this bed just felt too empty with just these kind of asparagus in most of the year and nothing else being there. And I was reading that some others were interplanting flowers in their asparagus beds. And so I went for it, and we put some flowers in here too. And so we've got some flowers in here that are probably totally done for the season, given where we're at in the year. Like we had some zinnias that really aren't very cold hardy, so I think they're probably done. But we've had some other flowers here that are like coming to life now with the weather as it is. So we've got some of these in here that are actually doing quite well here. So I'm going to be going along and kind of deadheading the stuff that is dying to try to make this look as nice as it can for our fall garden display. And then let you kind of follow along with me as I go along here with it. This here was a big zinnia, so no, I don't. Yes, it was. Yeah, I had two different flowers in my hands, but this was a big zinnia. So unlikely it'll flower again, but it still has some good green there, so I won't chop the whole thing off. I'll just deadhead it and let it live out till it fully dies. Got a lot of the leaves from the cedar trees all over here. We had a lot of wind over a week ago that left that stuff everywhere. But now they say in Portland the air is in stagnation, which is, now we're complaining there's not enough wind, because when the air's in stagnation, then it creates an air hazard for people with sensitive lungs, I guess. Notice I'm not cutting the asparagus ferns, and just we'll let them go all the way until they're just totally dead for the year. Last zinnia holding on here. Zinnias are annuals here. So these are all planted. They're one of my favorite flowers to plant, but they're always planted from, we plant them from seed every year. And like most of the stuff like that, we start them in the greenhouse, and then when the weather is right, we move them out of the greenhouse into these beds. They're great little flowers here. I haven't grown these before, and because I haven't grown them before, I forget what they were. I have to look them up in my little database of what I planted to remember what they are there. But I know that's a new one for this year that I didn't grow it last year. Well, that's it for the asparagus bed for now. I'll see you all in the next segment. Hi, well, I'm out here in the East Garden, and sometimes I refer to this as the East Round when I'm telling people where we're at or what we're doing, what part of the garden we're in. This big round planter here, and we've been putting lots of flowers in here. We put a lot of flowers in here this season, and as you can see, they're mostly, now that we're kind of really into the thick of fall, it's mostly dyed back or turned brownish. It doesn't look too bad, but I'm going to be working here on cleaning it up a bit, and just cutting to the ground the stuff that's somewhat dead, really just for the look of it, because if I just left this as is, it would fall over and disintegrate before spring anyway. But we like to enjoy the garden. You know, it's actually not too cold with a jacket. You can come out and enjoy the garden now. It's sunny outside, so why not make it look nice this part of the year as well, so that it is more enjoyable. That's the goal anyway. So that's what I'm working on here. Just trimming some of this dead stuff up. I generally practice no dig. I'm not trying to pull these out of the ground. I'm just cutting them off the base. This is mid-fall deadheading, and it looks like this project will probably take me another 15-20 minutes or so, but I won't make you sit here and watch me do it. I will see you all in the next segment. I am deadheading the Caledonia, which is also called the pot marigold. These are actually edible, and they're used for different kind of botanical applications. They've been a great grower in our garden. They grow pretty much all the time. They grow in the heat, they grow in the cold, and they spread well. They look nice. I like them. They're a good, they've been a good overall addition. But the reason I'm over here right now is actually not, I'm just deadending these while I happen to be here, but that's not what drew me over here. What drew me over here was, interplanted here is celery. And it's the first time I've ever grown celery, and it actually looks like celery. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off to the ground and yeah, harvest it. And we'll have a celery harvest here in November. Can't help myself from doing some of that deadheading there. Okay, so back to the celery. Let's do it. So, I mean, it seems pretty fragile there at the base, but I'm just going to cut the stalks off. And there you go. That's what the celery looks like. It's my first round growing it, so that's not bad. Throw it in my harvest basket there. You can hear it crunching, can you? Oh, I can, now that I'm cutting, I have that celery smell as well. So here's what I don't know. I don't know if I just leave this now, if it will grow back. So I'm going to try that. It's got a little bit of leafing on there. I'm going to leave that. And I'm going to otherwise leave the plant there. It's just a little rogue nightshade in here. I'm just going to leave this and see if it grows back. Although it's probably not the best experiment of it because we're going into the second week of November. So if it doesn't grow back, it may simply be the weather, but that's okay. We'll try it. There's a small celery plant here, still pretty small, so I'm just going to leave it. Same thing, one here. This one is so-so, but here we go. This one's a good size here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this one down. I'm trying to cut near the base, but as I get into it, some of it is breaking farther up the stem, and so I'm just going with it. Got a whole other plant back here. Our celery plants really liked the pot marigolds. They liked hanging out together, it seems. This one's still relatively small, so I'm going to mostly leave it, I think. This one's good size here, though. Hiding behind this gem marigold, which is getting quite rugged. Deadhead that. Oh, that has a nice fragrance to it, actually. I just pulled part of it out of the ground by accident. Ugh. Trying to leave a little bit of vegetation on there because I think it might still have some life to it, depending on the weather. Okay, now I can see my celery plant better. So back to business here. Some of these, you can see in there how white the stem is on the inside. Well, you can see a comparison here because you can see on one of them it's really white there. This one not so much. Just inferring from what I know from harvesting and using other plants, I think that this part that's white here, it's kind of old in there, so this is probably going to be pretty woody, pretty fibrous, not something we'd want to eat as much. Versus this guy, looks like it's not quite as fibrous, so it's going to be something that would be more edible, more enjoyable to eat. I'll sort that out later. All right, well, that's the celery harvest here at PDX Garden Home. I'll see you guys all later. Well, welcome back, and we're basically cleaning up for the day. It's been a good day of gardening out here, nice and sunny. Still kind of cool. I wanted to kind of give you my goodbye from this corner of the garden because we don't see it that often. It's where we have a lot of great flowers during the spring and summer, but it is the essence of fall right now, turning brown and kind of dying back, and we can barely keep up with kind of keeping it mostly cleaned up here. Well, that's it for this week's episode. I hope you're enjoying this, and if you are, please hit that subscribe button below. Tell your friends and family about us, and help us grow this community as much as we can here. And we will keep on gardening and keep on putting those videos out there for you. Okay, that's it, everybody. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.